This video comes in 3 parts. First, we discuss the original Christmas Saves the Year visualizer, then we talk about the lyrics, then we talk about the claymation video. That's the longest part, that last part. I'm not gonna lie, first 2 parts are a little bit dry. Skip them if you like. And for my friends who for some reason watch these videos that aren't 21 Pilots fans, guys, watch the music video first. Alright, let's do this. So, looking at the original visualizer, one, it looks old. It's got dust and scratches, like reviewing this on actual film, maybe a Super 8, I don't really know. And it's also depicting old things. It's showing these different images of Christmas from different eras in the past. And sometimes things in retrospect look a little odd. Up in that top left corner, you see these women dressed in about 1900s-ish dresses, and maybe they would have looked at these Santa masks to the right and gone, oh, that's very, very crafty and innovative, or however they talked. Whereas now, we look at those and go, oh, that is my nightmare, for instance. By contrast, the images below that are a lot more familiar. Stockings, candy cane, very kitschy Santa, but still themselves a little bit aged. It's also interesting that these images degrade over time. Not just the physical photos, but maybe the memory of these things, or even the meaning of some of what we're looking at. Not just aesthetic. Sometimes things fall so far out of cultural relevance that we don't even recognize them anymore. Like, these scenes were clearly iconic enough to be put on a postcard representative of the season. I don't know what they are doing. Christmas is the season where you take all the red plants out of the woods. And it's also the time when you and the homies go into the woods and drag any unattended stump and you bring it back to the family for Christmas. You probably noticed that some of these photos are saturating and desaturating. To me, I think that's representative of the thing I just described, like the way some things are more or less accessible. Things look a little more real in color and maybe a little more distant in black and white. Then we have snow-covered outside tree versus indoor, very decorated tree. Got some Christmas lights, a Christmas cartoon, some stockings. I think we've covered all the bases. You've got all the staples. Snowman, vaguely Dutch-looking girl. You get what I'm saying. I will note that one thing that was consistent throughout was fire and snow, because, well, those do consistently exist. So in the vein of this idea we just talked about, different eras being distinct and identifiable, from that angle you could see Christmas Saves the Year as kind of a soft lead-in to the Scaled and Icy era. I've seen more discussion than I've cared to as to whether people like the album, but when I see people say they don't like it, somehow they never mention the part where Scaled and Icy, musically, aesthetically, is basically a scrapbook of the greatest hits of the last 5 to 7 decades. Like, they're doing a thing. It is on purpose. There's a point. Kind of like this, actually.
I texted my mixer, I was like, yo, a Christmas song is coming down the pike. Get ready, clear your schedule. I'd like to get this mixed and done in a couple days. And he goes, oh, cool. Are you recording a classic or writing an original? I said, both.
Second part, lyrics. This next part, when I'm talking about the lyrics, I am not trying to sell you on sharing my opinion. It's just what I think. I think that this song is a little bit of a sensitive thing for a lot of people, and they want to see it as wholly wholesome. I mean, there's precious little that is untouched by what the last couple years have been like. So I get that. This is fairly dark, so if you want to skip it, I'll put a timestamp for the next portion. So here's Tyler talking about his experience of writing the song.
Anytime I hear the song again, I'll remember her when she's that age, 10 months old, sitting on my lap. She's holding down the low keys, hitting everything wrong, and I'm still trying to work through that that second verse. So it's just that's stuff that you can't manufacture. That's real for me.
So that's what he experienced, but that is a different thing than the concept. Here's him talking about that.
What I was doing, I was putting myself, I always need to put myself somewhere when I'm writing a song. And this song in particular, I know I have a few friends who live in some bigger cities that, man, they have these small apartments, man. Their version of Christmas is going to be the tiniest little decoration that they can, look at as they're trying to, weigh the options of whether or not they should see their family this year and stuff. And that's where I put myself when I was writing this song.
So the premise of this song is someone considering going home. So let's get into the lyrics. Snow falls down from the gray sky, ashes fall in the sea. So right off the bat, this is a Christmas song, but you can't really divorce that from the last 10 or 12 years of using cold to express something negative, or use it as a metaphor for a negative thing. I think snow in particular represents sort of the ubiquity of culture or societal messaging. And bear with me here, I know that sounds a little weird off the top, but consider fairly local, where the message is, you will never make it in radio because you're the wrong kind of music. That message isn't coming from the band, it's not internal to them, it's coming from the outside. Consider Saturday, where, I don't know if you can see the snow in frame here, where these people are getting on this submarine and they're dancing and they're heading for trouble, but they just keep dancing to the music. Consider Oh Misbeliever, where he says your twisted mind is like snow on the rooftops. Your twisted mind is like snow on the road. From my perspective, he's talking about, as they get older, they're exposed to more of the world than your local bubble. You kind of grow up and get out in the world and sometimes see some sharp contrasts to how you thought everybody lived, especially in the context of belief. This comes up elsewhere as well.
The concept behind the video of holding on to you is leaning more towards the dark side of things, like the friction between what it is we think life should be and what life actually is.
He says, please take my hand, we're in a foreign land. He thinks maybe she might need a little help navigating this. So we're talking about the ubiquitousness of the messaging and control of the society we live in. There's a quote by E.E. Cummings that goes, the snow doesn't give a soft white damn whom it touches. I think that's very apt. So snow falls down from the gray sky, ashes fall in the sea. There's this sense, visually, that the snow and the ash is intermingling. It's hard not to notice that when we talk about ash, we're talking about something that burned. When we say ashes, we're usually referring to a specific loss. Around Thanksgiving of last year, the time Christmas Saves the Year would have been recorded, the death toll was hovering around 500,000 people. You've really gotta have some balls to write a song called Christmas Saves the Year in that moment. The imagery of snow mixed with ashes it's quite a picture. Plans are thrown to the wayside, frozen days of the week. There's no recovery after this line. Plans are thrown to the wayside and that's it. Frozen days of the week. We're not moving forward. And set it next to you, everybody wants to make it home this year, even if the world is crumbling down. Not even though, but even if, as though we're still not looking in the face what is happening, thousands of people dying a day. And this is why I call this darkest timeline. The contrast between everybody's got somebody with their name on a shelf, with cheap decor and flavored cheer. Rest assured, Christmas saves the year. When somebody asks you what is important about the holidays, you don't say, well, I need to hang the stockings. You probably don't even know why we hang stockings. I didn't, but apparently St. Nicholas helped an old German man who was going to be very poor and sell his kids into prostitution, and St. Nicholas threw some gold coins into the house that landed in stockings that were drying by the fireplace, and now we have a wholesome tradition. And this is actually about where I'm going to stop covering the lyrics, because this line right here, to me, is the gist. We're talking about the trappings, cheap decor, flavored cheer, the suggestion that it's empty and synthetic. Candy canes, eggnog, we don't know why we do these things. We do them because we do them. If you traveled to see family in 2020, I got no judgment for you. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But I bet you didn't travel for this. Compare cheap decor and flavored cheer to this.
She's holding down the low keys, hitting everything wrong, and I'm still trying to work through that that second verse. And yeah, so it's just that's stuff that you can't manufacture. That's real for me.
So in the same way that Neon Gravestones doesn't describe the motives of everyone who takes their own life, no matter what this song is about, it's not going to describe everyone either. But when the stakes are this high, I think there is some suggestion here that maybe we believe that if we do all the motions we're used to doing, even if we don't know why we do them, if we just do the things we know we're somehow supposed to do, then things will be okay. Christmas will save the year. Alright, let's get into this claymation video. So here we have Santa, or someone that's really nailing the Santa branding, looking like he hasn't slept since 1997. Get a load of those purple eyes, matching the skyline. Among the opening shots is some very red fire. Let's just take an inventory of everything in the room. We've got these empty bottles, the hazmat mask, his empty lunch, stressed out, copy, pumpkin spice, Mulberry Street. This picture is a cameo of the animator. It's right there. And then there's the hype. From this other angle, we have chlorine. I think that's paint. You can see the NT on the end. I already said copy and pumpkin spice. There's a little piece of coal over there. And lastly, we have, what is that, doubt, good day, the judge. Up the top there is Bandito. We have this record that's also a little tie-in from the animator from some other thing he worked on. A car, a skull, which were probably also props from something else. And up there is the outside. And I think that's right. We of course can't forget all the blades in the room. I count 1 axe, 1 cleaver, 2 hatchets, 2 kitchen knives, and the one he's eating with. So what does all this stuff tell us? Well, first of all, it looks like there is no bed. I don't think he actually sleeps. Maybe he sleeps in the snowmobile, but I do think it's like part of the point that he's a little cracked out on insomnia. In fact, if you look at that purple under his eyes, and you look at almost any scene in the entire video, that purple light is present, perhaps suggesting that his sleeplessness and what he's seeing are related. He's got these writings on the wall, these drawings, that contain somebody's theories of how things work. Maybe his. I don't know if it matters. The empty bottles and empty plates are kind of giving this vibe, a little less than tidy. So taken together with the pictures on the walls and the books, we get a picture of a guy that's consuming quite a lot. Specifically, some of the same things we're consuming. Like, do you get what I'm saying? He's got his food and his stuff he's kind of obsessing over and his media and no sleep. It is a vibe. Okay. Let's take a look at this video from the top. So we start off with this wide shot and slowly close in on the cabin. As we do so, we notice the snowmen. They're crowding towards, we're just going to call him Santa's window, but they also turn to look at us, which is really interesting, because at no point in this video does the main character actually catch them moving. He might as well be acting on paranoia, because every time he looks at them, they're perfectly still. So this is an example of both breaking the fourth wall, a character looks into the camera, and also dramatic irony, when the audience knows something that the characters don't. Bear in mind, that doesn't mean necessarily that the snowmen are real, it just means we're in on something that maybe the main character isn't consciously aware of. We've already covered the part where we talk about what's in the room, so the first action we see him doing is crafting his own interpretations of the things and the pictures on the wall. And sometimes he takes a little bit of artistic license. He seems very familiar with what they look like in the drawings, but that's not always what he chooses to represent in his version. He's got this painting hung above his fireplace. Is the blocky snowman a creative interpretation, or something that only exists in his imagination? Maybe he isn't sure. Or maybe he just likes one version better than the other. So he's standing there going about his business, doing his thing, and he gets spooked. Acting on this, he goes to take precautionary measures, as outlined in his notes. We're gonna need an energy beacon, and orb emitters, and snow glow pearls. And with these mystical implements, we're gonna give the snowmen the business. I wanted to throw this comment in here somewhere. The fact that the edges are burned, I don't really know what that means, but I do remember the thing with the masks being quote-unquote burned by trash for Shy Away. We should also make note of the fact that writings or drawings on the wall have featured in other places. But bear in mind, these aren't just drawings. These are representations of the things that are driving his decisions in his life. The city he sees as his trap, the cage, prevalence of vialism, the tree that we are trying to get to in car radio, the neon gravestones of suicides. We're looking at this guy's theory of how things work. Or if it's not his theory, at least a version he believes. Or if you want to get really meta and take one step further back, this drawing in the real world. Maybe this is Tyler's theory of how things work. So as he's making his way, notice that the snowmen don't actually do anything to harm him. even though they're the reason he's going out to take precautionary measures. And they're doing a real good job being menacing. The first stop is the kiosk. I don't know why these guys have teeth. I do wonder if they're quote-unquote fake teeth, because it looks like they're like wearing outfits that are stitched up the middle of the head. Or I guess what should have been more obvious, like Anna pointed out, is they're wearing skeleton hoodies. I don't know what that means, but they offer to sell Santa these ornament hooks, but he just jacks them. No clear reason. He's just like, no, I won't buy them, but I will steal them. Get fucked. What are you gonna do? The man's got a cleaver. So, there is Santa's first choice. He steals in pursuit of his goal. Then we head elsewhere in the woods, to this tree that's either gold or gingerbread. Not a distinction I usually have trouble making, but it's clay, so I got nothing. A bear is eating it. Santa looks at this thoughtfully and is like, yes, I will take one of those. And so he does. Here's his second choice, a morally ambiguous one. If you want to take the fruit of one tree and put it on another tree, I guess. Then Ned appears. He's with a very Dr. Seuss looking machine. He engages the machine, and he gives Santa an ornament of his own head, as one does. And then he dips, like the weird little leprechaun/goat demon that he is. There's just something not right about that thing. So, Santa comes upon some much scarier snowmen menacing a small deer, and he kills him, I guess. That seems pretty dead. And the deer is like, you're my new dad. This is his third choice. It's a good one. He saved the deer. Good job. They move along into some trippy red and white woods. A sloth and a rabbit gave Santa ornaments, baubles they're called, which apparently are naturally occurring. Here's Santa's fourth choice. He takes the ornaments. I'm kind of losing my bearings here. Is that good? Bad? I don't know. Here are some questions that I thought about for way too long. I don't really know how much kiosk Muppets know about capitalism, so I'm going to stop thinking about it. But if you have an answer, feel free to share. As night grows near, Santa and his dear friend fell a tree for their Christmas tree. The moment it is cut and dropped, night falls. From there, we go see a possum who offers him Christmas lights with imagery that looks distressingly like blood flowing through a vein that he then opens. He just gets his hand right up in there. That's totally not weird. It definitely makes me think of the Outside's visualizer with the colorful hypnosis wheel, which is just a variation on this. But something about exposure to bright colors. It's hard not to draw parallels with Tyler also having black gloves down the bottom right there, sticking his hand in the bowl, and Message Man's very colorful visuals. Anyway, haven't figured it out, but
completely saturated.
There's something going on there. Next, we travel behind the hill, just beyond the red light, and that's where the skeleton key and the alien key are. You can see to the left side of the screen some of that red light on the alien key's limbs. What's especially odd about this is you see the drawings and you expect them to be a less real version of a more real thing, but they are not. They just look like the drawings. They're a symbol of a symbol. As far as supernatural beings go, they have a very I made it myself vibe. I don't really know what they're trying to convey here, but they're expressing something. Good for them. This is all going somewhere. There's a point. Finally, we head back. Santa gets everything set up on his tree. He's got his ornaments, he plugs in his lights. At the moment he plugs in his lights, he's happy, and the deer's nose turns red. Off, on, off, on. Neat. There's more going on here than a Rudolph joke. Lastly, and most importantly, Santa's snowmen are happy. Then the camera pulls back out, the snowmen are looking at us, and here comes Ned, being creepy as shit. So Ned knows about us too. He also contributed to what took place here. So it's almost like he's saying, look what I did, bye. Or at least, was complicit in. So that's the whole video. Now, let's go back through it. Why are the snowmen happy? And why is Santa happy if what he set out to do was kill them? We are given to believe that the effect of the tree and the ornaments is going to make them melt and be defeated, but they're just happy. They're happy because Santa is happy, not because they're separate entities that have feelings about his happiness, but because they directly represent his anxieties. What is happening here with all these choices that Santa makes? Well, essentially, he's carrying out a ritual. All of these things are quite literally things he found in the woods. The things he calls orb emitters, the ornaments, are not protecting his space through radiant cosmic rays. They're just sitting on the tree. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that he believes they are. Or maybe what matters most is the things that he is willing to do to carry out his beliefs. The bad, the good, and the weird. The reason that I'm calling this a ritual is because the outcome is either symbolic or greater than the results that you can actually pull out of the tools you have. Like, this is a tree and some ornaments. As far as we can see, there are no cosmic rays involved. So why does he call these orb emitters? Radiant oh, is he saying they're shiny? They're like signal boosters? Okay, what's a beacon? A light or other visible object serving as a signal, warning, or... Okay. I mean, as far as we know, these are some kind of cookie, but do what you gotta do. This is a type of magical thinking, or delusion if you're nasty. This is sort of adjacent to the idea of a cargo cult. If you haven't heard of that, it's a belief system that exists in some islands that were isolated until World War II, where they then had contact with the US military. To this day, some adherents, they'll recreate airstrips and go through the motions of air traffic control, or do drill and ceremony like the soldiers did, with the belief that by reenacting what the soldiers did, they'll make the soldiers return and bring with them the manufactured goods that really impacted their way of living. So they're quite literally manifesting. Santa believes that if he puts together a Christmas tree with all its parts like ornaments and lights and a star, it will magically defeat his fears. Sound familiar? Now let's keep going back through. 3 things about this red place. 1, all the animals have something red about them as part of them. 2, each of the animals there, aside from the deer I guess, facilitate what Santa is trying to do. They don't give him any grief, and they offer him the things that he's looking for. And this weird red area, and the skeleton key and the alien key all have the same kind of distortion. I don't know that I'd call that a pattern necessarily, but they all have it. So there is a relationship between these animals, the keys, and that area. And based on the way these roots are kind of like infected looking, maybe that relationship isn't the most wholesome one. Let's talk about the pictures on the walls. I don't really think there's a ton to be said for this one, other than conveying that these little kiosk Muppets are within the group of things that Santa kind of speculates about. The skeleton key and the alien key both seem to be radiating something that sort of culminates in this compassy/psi symbol. So we're seeing a representation of the power that they specifically have. They made it really hard to see this drawing, but I attempted to reproduce it, and here you can see it says the tree is the symbol. Okay, so we have the physical symbol representing the power that these supernatural beings, the skeleton key and the alien key, are radiating. Presumably it would be bad manners to cut down the actual sacred stump, but according to this drawing, store-bought is basically fine. You can just go get your own tree. And as you can see by the fact that it's radiating psi/compass-ease, you just need a symbol of the symbol of the symbol, and it'll work just fine. So we have the source of the energy. Oh, that's what they're doing. They're radiating. Good job, guys. Right, so we've got the source of the energy, the manifestation of that energy, instructions for recreating that manifestation, to deliver the energy to its intended target, the snowman, so that they no longer cause him fear. Now the relationship between the compass E, and therefore the psi, and the alien key and the skeleton key is a definite one. That does exist. Somebody asks, was the East is Up symbol designed to also be part of Tyler's skeleton logo, or is it just a cool coincidence? And the designer says, while some wonderful coincidences have occurred as we've told this story, that logo connection is not one of them. So as long as there's been a skeleton key, there's been a compass E. That is pretty wild. This symbol was created in summer 2014, and now here we are almost 8 years down the line with this noodly guy. Okay. Now, while I have you, I've seen in the last year or so a lot of people talk about these symbols as though they are the same symbol, but they are not. So I just want to run through the progression of events that led to these distinct different things. So the first time we see that particular E that would become the compass E is the blurry face branding. So very first thing, front of the record. Inside the lyric booklet after that, there's FPE written out, oriented east up, I guess you would put it. And then from there, it was part of the silence header at the beginning of the hiatus. And then from there, we move into Trench, where it is one of the 5 symbols on the album cover representing the Bandito ethos. Fast forward to the present. Somebody asks what the new logo is. Brandon Rank, the designer, says, "It's the ninja weapon Psi, which is an acronym for Scaled and Icy, the Greek character Psi, as well as an evolution of our East is Up symbol." Now, if you didn't watch this unfold, it went like this. The last we hear from Clancy is January 2019. He's back in the city. He's discouraged. His last line is, "There's still so much I do not understand." Cue the level of concern, ARG. You are in what appears to be a basement. There's steps overhead, creaking floorboards, flies. There's a camera pointed on you, speakers and a television playing what seems to be like brainwashing material. The winners of the game later in the year, in late October, receive USBs, containing a couple different things, but most importantly, videos from Josh and Tyler, ostensibly congratulating them for winning the game, but also Tyler's included a coded message in the background on a television spelling out Clancy is dead.
So keep listening, keep paying attention, and I really hope we see you soon.
So October 2020, that's the first time we hear Clancy is dead. About 6 weeks later, this image is posted as an advertisement for a charity Christmas stream the next day. If you look closely, it says Size Propaganda, both PSI and SAI. So that is where the two sides come from. So February 2021, Tyler posts this selfie with a blue Psi, PSI, over his right eye. And Greek letters have been around for a little while, so they have a lot of associations. But for Psi, particularly, it's strongly associated with psychology. That's Freud, sometimes called the father of psychology. You can Google it. Now, this wasn't on the list of associations that Brandon wrote out, but I also kind of thought it had something to do with pressure, because PSI is an initialism for pounds per square inch, and, this whole thing. Plus, the control room had a pressure gauge. The thing in the center there, that's a pressure gauge, the blue and yellow. I think that's yellow. And if we're coming from the position that both of these things are propaganda, I mean, what is propaganda other than weaponized pressure? But anyway, the last thing Mr. Reich describes is the ninja weapon Psi, which is exactly what it sounds like. So to tie this all together, we've got the skeleton key, which contains the compass E, which evolves into the Psi, which contains the Psi and the other Psi. Mix it all together and ta-da! AJ Hansen asks, is the Psi good or bad? Great question. I do think it's interesting that the snowmen have Psis for hands. There's no other depiction of wood in the video that looks like that, with like the gnarly, spindly kind of thing going on. The visual suggestion is certainly there. I mean, there's no reason to think these snowmen aren't just as speculative as everything else in these pictures on the wall. So it's like the thing that delivers him from his fear is also part of what causes it. That's dark. I also think it's interesting that aside from these ones, his drawings look rather decisively more like the compass E than the thing that actually exists, that tree stump thing, that looks a lot more like a Psi. And even though Brandon called this an evolution of the compass E, I do think there is a relationship there, because there is a Psi on stage at the show, but there's also a giant compass E on the ceiling, like one is the long shadow cast by the other. So evolution or not, the compass E still exists in its own right. So what is real? There's still nothing to suggest throughout this video any of this is actually happening, with the emitting of the energy and what have you. But in exactly the same way that Clancy may or may not be dead, what matters is what you believe about it. Because whatever you believe is the reality that you do in fact live in. Santa himself is not 100% sure what is or isn't real here. And unfortunately, I can't read this. So the best we've got to work with is my attempted recreation, but I think the words, "is it real?" gives us kind of the gist, probably. On the left side of the page here, we have the tree, a symbol doing its emitting, like we saw in the other drawings. This is the one he had his eye on and they cut down, as we saw. Now, the existence of the stump thing itself is pretty plausible. It's just a tree. The thing that's in question is whether in fact it does the thing we suspect it does. And I think that's what's being asked here by, is it real? I think that's another way of saying, is it viable? Like, is there life in it? And this is the only way I can think of to articulate this. But if you showed me this, and told me it was a symbol with powers, the first thing I'd probably say to you would be, well, it looks a little dead. So I think we can get on an intuitive level the kind of question that's being asked. Sort of similar to how these tree roots look infected, like whatever's in the ground is being drawn up into the tree. There's a similar effect happening with the trees tree, where you see white and green by turns being sort of drawn up into the body of the tree. But possibly some significant things about this imagery is that, one, during the Bandito tour, which is the time frame this particular set of visuals started being used, Dima was presented as black and white, and we see the tree in black and white some of the time, so maybe that's not good. Now, if you're familiar with this channel, you will recognize this quote pretty instantly, but here's some context for the new folks.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with specifically the live show, whether it's the content on the screens or what the lights are doing, and all the way down to what colors represent what, and having those colors kind of battle each other, and one of them wins. And there's actually a lot of storyline inside of our production of our live show that maybe a lot of people don't catch on to, which is fine because we know that it's there for us.
Now, this green and yellow versus red and white still exists in Jumpsuit up through the Takeover tour. And actually, they're still using the same trees visuals too. But where it's relevant here is, while we do see the tree sometimes in black and white, we also see it with green. So knowing that green is good and white is bad, that's some fairly easy math. It seems that the question of whether this is viable has yet to be answered, the tree is being fed with both good and bad. As for our guy, I'm not sure his prospects are so good. The tree looks pretty normal outside, but I'm not sure inside it's actually green. Now, this might seem pretty minor or maybe mistakable, but bear with me for a sec. We're going to venture into the somewhat more speculative with reasonable suspicion. So he's got these lights on the tree, right? Okay, the lights are green, so take all the green out of the picture. The difference is non-existent. I think this might actually just be black. Okay, where's this going? When the winners of the Level of Concern ARG got their USBs as the prize, they found they contained unique files, like official artwork, to include the trench camo. And if you sort through the files and look at them one by one, you find that some of the yellow flowers that are so important to the story are actually growing on blackened stems. This is not a mistake, the bulbs are blackened too. You can see that the blooms themselves are also kind of withered. I don't know about you, but this is not a picture of hope to me. It was actually right there on a piece of merch, just like so many things, not in a way that invited you necessarily to look closer. So you take that and you set it next to these sort of tucked away falsetto vocals from Levitate. They don't know they'll never get out. They don't know their way around. So his hope as to whether this symbol is growing leaves, I don't know, man. It doesn't seem promising. But then again, it's not like he did anything to change his situation. He just temporarily feels better about it. Okay, so we have one more thing. One more floating unanswered question. Symbol on the bird. Where do you see a fucking bird? I feel like I need a commercial break here. This is a haul. Jeez. Alright. Get through it. My best guess for a bird is the trash dragon. We know that a trash dragon is quote-unquote slang for a vulture in Dima.
In Dima, a trash dragon is kind of slang for a vulture. Little tidbit for you.
And we know that Trash himself is a vulture reimagined. Like, this is the only object in this entire thing that I can see. I mean, it basically has a sign that says, I represent a bird, which is more than 0 representations of a bird. Plus, in late 2020, we got that weirdly colorful collection of merch, and we saw vultures depicted as red for the first time. Santa is a passenger on the snowmobile, but we can kind of infer that he is the trash dragon in question, not his snowmobile, because that's a machine. Much like this guy has labeled himself Vulture. So I didn't know that robins were related to Christmas. I was just like, that looks like a robin, so I just googled Robin Christmas. And it turns out, I mean, you could just read the thing, robins actually used to be called redbreast. In Victorian England, where, as we have established, they were very bored, the postmen used to wear double-breasted red coats, resembling the red patch on the body of an English robin. The name robin isn't the name of the bird, it's just a name for the purpose of alliteration. Like you might say Nervous Nelly, they would say Robin Redbreast. Here's a few examples of that. And eventually the actual name of the bird, Redbreast, just fell off and they stuck with Robin. Why Christmas? It was just a big deal to get Christmas letters. You're in Victorian England. What do you gotta do? Nothing. wait for the mail. Now, obviously, I don't know if this is the intended connection, but robins are associated with Christmas. Robins have a distinctive spot right where that symbol is. And that spot happens to be a color that's thematically very important to the entire story. And you know who's also frequently got a red mark? Tyler Joseph. As it says here, and I'm only showing this to emphasize that the thought doesn't come from this music video, I always wondered if the reason the bishop got Tyler in jumpsuit was because he had a smudge of red on him. It's all about jurisdiction, right? I figure he sees one of his own. Maybe in the same way yellow marks out banditos for each other, red marks out citizens of Dima. I don't know if you recall Brandon Reich, the creative director, talking about they toyed with the idea of associating a flower in the trench camo with a specific song, so each song would have its own flower. We've got our Rebel Red Carnation for chlorine, obviously, but based on this idea being marked by red, I kind of assumed this begonia that's tinted red would be the flower for a jumpsuit. The idea of this mark isn't just in the trench era, it extends back to the blurry face era as well, and of course further depending on how you look at it. So here's the outfit from Ride, the blurry face era version of the green coat, and a very straightforward red cuff. What you see behind that is the first few frames of Ride, where Tyler and his green coat are attempting to blend in, but the red cuff gives him away. I mean, like, we the viewer can see him. But also he does get got by blurry face. Because remember,
There's actually a lot of storyline inside of our production of our live show.
so here is the video that used to come before Ride during the blurry face era. Which is not literally the same thing as this, but like, isn't it? This example is from the very, very beginning of the blurry face era. The wardrobe customizations like this were generally done by hand by Amanda Valentine, their then stylist, who is now retired because she had a little baby. Red mark. Subtle, but there. Okay, recap. We know that trash is a reimagined vulture, and we also know that trash dragon is slang for vulture. Santa is riding around on a red thing labeled Trash Dragon, and we have seen vultures depicted as red. He also envisions himself in relation to it in a certain way, just like the bandito does with the vulture. The picture that he has drawn on his wall of the symbol implies a relationship between the bird and the symbol, because the symbol is on its chest. The bird looks like a robin. The robin has red on its chest. Red, or being marked by red, is a motif that extends back very far. The animals that help him carry out the instructions on his papers on the wall also are all marked by red. When the deer sees the light on the Christmas tree, his nose turns red. We all know that vultures can be either good or bad.
Yeah, the vulture is it's just an important part of the narrative of the record in the city of Dima. The vulture represents so much to the inhabitants of Dima because it's one of the only things, only creatures they see that leaves and comes back. And it almost becomes a sense of inspiration to see that vulture leaving the wall of Dima and being able to fly wherever it wants, and yet it still comes back. And so if you're from Dima, you look at that vulture as kind of something that represents who you want to become. And then also there's this whole other kind of deep dive into the narrative that really hasn't been talked about much, but the vulture represents a lot of the religion that's involved in the city of Dima and is important to its existence. And so in a way it kind of has this double meaning of inspiration but also kind of evil as well.
Theoretically, the good version is how banditos see themselves. If you think of the song Bandito and the line, "Still not sure fear's a rival or close relative to truth," on the record Trench, there is only one rival, and his color is red. I'm not trying to tell you that I've decided that red is fear. I'm saying, if Tyler is talking about a rival in the context of Trench, who else is he going to be talking about? Obviously there's more to Blurryface than that, but if you're going to shorthand it in one word, what better word than fear? But as for Santa, he's not so much running away from his fear in this case as indulging it. He's not addressing what he's afraid of, he's accommodating it so that he feels better. And fear is something that at least Santa and the deer have in common. So, in conclusion, red and fear. Presumably one of these represents doing what Santa does here, accommodating his fear. But I sure don't know which one it is. I also don't know to what extent the general question, is it real, can be answered. Does it matter if there is such a thing as a cosmic ray if he ends up unafraid at the end? Would it be worth proving they don't exist if it took away his one opportunity to feel peace? It's getting a little deep in here. Is truth something objective apart from you that you sometimes get a conduit to? Or is it just whatever lens you're seeing through at the time? I am so tired of thinking about this. Okay, just one last little thing, because I'll be mad if I don't put it in there. For some reason, the way these are placed make me think of footprints, and I wonder if that is the case, if that's what they really look like, or if that's how you perceive them, because bird footprints look like this. So does that mean this is in our future? Anyway, that's my guess about the symbol on the bird and every other possible thing. I don't know, who knows? I've been working on this video a month. I'm done. I will see you on another time.